The inside of the First Order's command center had been a lot nicer. It had been clean, polished, and pristine, and although you had at first been daunted by its grandeur, you had come to expect it from the First Order. The Resistance Command Center wasn't shabby or dirty per se, but you could tell that cleanliness clearly wasn't a priority here. And you supposed that was fair. It looked like this was a room that was visited frequently by many different people, and they probably didn't have the numbers to assign any one person to scour it clean like the First Order did. At least it meant that they weren't trying to put on pretenses, or maybe they just had no one they were concerned with impressing. You see a woman standing with her back towards you at the other end of a circular console. You make your way around the structure, past the flashing panels and colorful knobs, vaguely wondering what they are used for until you come to a stop beside her. She says your name and you just bow your head, trying to be respectful of her position. You weren't about to drop to one knee, but you weren't quite sure how to address her either. Suddenly, she turns to you and sweeps you up in her arms, and you allow yourself to be embraced, arms pressed uncomfortably into your sides. She pulls away from you as she looks you over, and you can see that she's older by the lines in her stern face, and yet she was still quite beautiful, hair swept into an updo that you would have no idea how to pull off if you tried. You look her over, almost a bit disappointed to realize that she really doesn't look that much like Kylo. Maybe he inherited strong genes from his father? If so, that seemed to run in the family. General, you say softly, still not sure how else to address her. You can call me Leia, she says, pushing the corners of her lips into a tight-lipped smile. How was your trip here? It was, interesting, you tell her, not knowing quite how else to describe it. You didn't need to send your commander to get us, though. She laughs, and her hair shakes lightly but stays in place. Poe? Oh, yes. She smiles and shakes her head as if she's enjoying some little private joke that you're not in on. Yes, he warned me about how you got the jump on him. Knocked him out with your staff. Your jaw drops open. You had hardly been here for any time at all, and Poe was already tattling on you for knocking him out? In my defense, you were protecting your son, she says, her eyes gleaming. From one mother to another, I wouldn't have expected anything less. He tells me you named him Anakin. I didn't, you tell her. Kylo did. Kylo, she muses, imitating your inflection. I've not heard anyone call him that. She shakes her head as she lets out a heavy sigh. Usually, most people just call him Ren now. That's what most people in the First Order call him too, you tell her, which is why I call him Kylo. She stares you down, and you stare right back, letting a silent understanding come between you. You have the Force too, you tell her, posing it more of a statement than a question. I do, she confirms. I felt it when your son was first born. I felt something in the Force. You swallow the lump in your throat, trying to make the motion seem as inconspicuous as possible. I'm sure others felt it too. Like Snoke, you ask? What do you know about him? Leia shakes her head as she takes a seat and gestures for you to do the same. There are no chairs nearby, and so you retrieve one from a nearby console before you sit down beside her. It's uncomfortable, and quite frankly, you prefer to stand, but you didn't want to tower over her. You worked as an interpreter for long enough to be familiar with the body language of power plays, and so you knew it would be better to stay seated. Exhaling a heavy breath through your nostrils, you crossed your left leg over your right knee and gripped it tightly in both hands, mentally preparing yourself for whatever you're about to hear. I think it's best if you told me about him first, she says gently. Have you talked to anyone else about what you've been through? My friends know, you tell her, purposely neglecting to mention which friends. Then again, if people had been spying on you, she probably knew who you were talking about anyway. She watches you patiently, waiting for you to continue. You know I was his captive there, right? The others think he tortured me. She says, noncommittally, and you're perturbed by the fact that you can't quite read her expression. Maybe that was a trait Kylo had inherited from his mother after all. It wasn't all bad, you tell her, letting out a deep breath. I mean, yeah, he did choke me with that force grip. You rub your neck with your fingertips at the recollection. But Bee told you about that, right? She nods her head solemnly, but says nothing. Yeah, you let out a deep breath. He could have killed me, but he didn't. It's clear she's not going to talk again until she hears what she wants from you, and so you decide right then to just put it all out on the table. If she was going to give you the answers that you wanted, then you saw no reason not to extend her the same courtesy. Yeah, so I don't know how much you know. Taro put the wall in my head to get Ren interested in me, and it worked. But then B got discovered, and Ren killed him, and C, and the rest of the Tortudaroo, except Taro. He died trying to escape. Well, he died because he stopped to try to save me first, but he wanted me to escape with him, but I stayed behind to try to help my friends escape. And I did. One of my friends was a personal captive to General Hux, and I managed to free her and send her home. I mean, Kylo freed her. She looks at you appraisingly, and you offer a genuine smile in her direction. He really did. Kylo saved her life and sent her home, no questions asked. She purses her lips as she looks down, as if trying to steady her thoughts for a moment. Do you know how the First Order found out about your assignment? I accidentally told Kylo that Sadie knew about our relationship right before we fucked for the first time, and when he probed her mind to find out what she knew about us, he ended up finding out that she knew more than she was supposed to. Not sure, you reply, pulling your long hair over your left shoulder in your signature tick. And this girl, Leia continues, he rescued her? She's like a sister to me, you explain. Kylo knew how much she meant to me, and so when he found out she was being kept captive, he helped free her, and he sent her back home. Why do you think he did that? Leia asks, tilting her head to the side as she leans back in her chair. You know at once that this isn't a simple question, that she's waiting for you to impart some deeper bit of insight into his character, but her question is going to get a simple answer nonetheless. Because he can be a good person when he wants to be, you tell her. You believe that? It strikes you as a question, but she poses it more as an assertion, because it's very clear from the look on your face that you really did truly believe that. I do, you tell her. I don't know what he's done recently, as he hasn't visited me in a few years, but I know at least back then he was still capable of doing good things. Was he kind to you? She asks at length. He choked me, you say, gesturing against your neck. She narrows her eyes at you, and so you let out a deep breath. Yes, he was kind. He took care of me. He went out of his way to make sure I was happy there, and he helped me to try to develop my force power so I could protect myself. She tries to hide it, but she can't conceal the flash of surprise in her eyes. He trained you? Just to protect myself. I can't do much, just mind probing and picking up stuff and, things. You say, momentarily forgetting what exactly you could use the Force for. You hadn't really used it much for quite a few years. You simply hadn't needed to. Oh, and he let me use his lightsaber once, but that didn't go so well. She looks surprised at that last piece of information, and she lets out a long sigh before asking her next question. You loved him, didn't you? I didn't love him, you blurt out defensively. She waits for you to gather your thoughts, and you cross your arms over your chest like a petulant child. This was so weird to be discussing with Kylo Ren's mother of all people. I mean, I don't know if that's what it was. I was technically his prisoner. It wasn't like I could have just walked off whenever I wanted. She stays silent, and you can tell she's trying to figure out if she should tell you something or not. You know something I don't? I felt through the Force that the child was born of love, she says at length, but she sounds almost frustrated by it. I could feel it. And I thought that meant that he was coming around, that he wanted to make a change, that we could bring him back to our side. That's why I sent... She lets her voice trail off and she doesn't continue. Did something happen? You ask quietly, and she just shakes her head, unable to bring herself to answer that question right now. I mean, okay, yes, I did tell him I loved him, and he told me that he loved me. You let your voice trail off this time and refuse to look at her. You don't want to look at her. You don't want to see the expression on her face. Would she be surprised that he had said that he had loved you? The others don't know, though, do they? Why should they? She asks, and you tilt your head to the side, giving her at least some credit. Your affairs between you and Kylo were your business, and she respected that, at least to the point where her child and her grandchild were concerned. I mean, I don't know if I still love him. It was all very, I don't know, physical. And then he sent me away. Like, really, he was worried about my safety on base, and so he sent me home with Ladson. He had Ladson trained to be a pilot and trained to protect me. Poe didn't believe it, but the truth is we never had to escape from Starkiller Base. Kylo just let us go. You run a hand through your hair. And at first I thought he'd, I don't know, come back for me when the whole thing was over. But then a year later, I've got his baby at my hip, and he only visited a few times, up until Annie was about 2. And then I never saw him again. He just never came back. Again, you refused to look at her, embarrassed by your own outpouring of emotion. You had been open a few times with Ladson, but they were few and far between, and even then, you never felt satisfied. He couldn't give you any answers. He didn't know Kylo Ren. Not like you knew him. Even Sadie didn't really know him. But his mother? You knew that she had been ignorant of exactly what had transpired on board, but he was still her son, and she had to have known things about his character that you were still unaware of. Right? I don't know, she says at length, and you can't help but feel disappointed. I wasn't there, but I can feel you, and I can feel the strength of your emotions. You bring yourself to meet her eyes again. You still seem loyal to him, hopelessly devoted to him. She looks down as if she's almost ashamed of herself. He may be my son, but I can say he doesn't deserve it. You bite your bottom lip anxiously. You don't want to defend him, but you feel like you don't have any other choice. He didn't use me. B used me for that whole big mission that you orchestrated. He put me up as bait, as a distraction. He put my life in danger. But Kylo never used me for anything. He was always completely open and honest with me. What has he told you? Leia asks. Her tone was clipped, getting right to the point of your conversation here. Nothing, you admit softly. Nothing about his past or his real name or what he was doing with the First Order. That doesn't surprise me, Leia sighs as she bows her head. You deserve answers. She looks away, clearly uncomfortable, and you can sense a but coming on. Either way, you're ready to counter whatever she says. You came here for answers, not safety. You could protect your son yourself, but you would never find out about Kylo's past any other way. I just wish I wasn't the one who had to tell you. She sounds regretful, mournful, and you mentally ease up a little bit. You thought you had been through a lot, but you had no idea what she had been through herself. You decide to start with an easy question. How did you get here? You ask quietly. How did you become leader of the Resistance? She smiles at you warily, as if she knows what you're trying to do. Either way, she answers your question. I've always been involved. In one way or another. I've always been fighting against the Empire's dictatorship. First against the Emperor with the Alliance, and now against Snoke and the First Order with the Resistance. You nod your head slowly, and she continues. I was a senator in the Galactic Senate of the New Republic on Hosnian Prime for many years. Since the death of Emperor Palpatine, we had been taking steps to ensure democracy was returned to the galaxy. I was one of the first to deem the First Order as a true threat to the progress we had made. I tried to warn the New Republic Senate, but they refused to listen. She scoffs bitterly, rubbing her thumb against her bottom lip. They called me a warmonger, so I left. I formed the resistance with some aid from members of the New Republic who shared my concerns. You just nod slowly, taking it all in. You honestly hated history and politics of any sort. It hadn't really filtered into your way of life at your academia, as it was so far removed from the rest of the galaxy. It had always been viewed as a neutral party by both sides, simply a place to study knowledge for learning's sake and nothing more. You had since learned that that wasn't quite true, and you were beginning to suspect that certain professors at your academia probably had alliances to one side or the other, just like B had sided with the Resistance. For all you knew, you weren't just being spied on by the Resistance, but by the First Order as well. You were learning the hard way that although you had at first professed neutrality at the beginning of your internship on the Starkiller base, there was no such thing as a neutral entity. Everyone, eventually, would be forced to pick a side. You could delay it for as long as possible, as you clearly were, but you could no longer continue to profess your love for Kylo Ren and work with his enemy, the Resistance. It just wasn't possible. You were eventually going to have to choose one side or the other. Did you form the Resistance before or after Kylo Ren joined the First Order? You ask her. After, she confirms, and you take a moment to take it all in. So Kylo had betrayed her in some way, and then she had officially formed the Resistance? To fight him, specifically? Because she knew how powerful he was? I'm sorry, she confesses at length. This isn't easy to talk about. After all these years, I suppose it should be, but... It's all right, you tell her. I mean, it's your son. Sometimes I wonder, she murmurs to herself, and you feel a shiver run up your spine. You decide maybe it's just best to stick to the basic questions for now. What was his name, you ask her, before he became Kylo Ren? Ben, she tells you. Ben Solo. You pause and think for a moment. So Ren was really Ben? Ben. You say it a few times to yourself, over and over again, but it still doesn't make any sense to you. It sounds so normal. You can see why he picked an alternative title to distinguish himself. Is that a family name as well? My brother's idea, she says, fixing you with a knowing smile. My brother, Luke, he named him after his old Jedi Master, Obi-Wan Kenobi, but he knew him as Ben. Han didn't want to go for it at first, but he was persuaded. Jedi Master, you ask, tilting your head to the side. So, your brother Luke, he's a Jedi? She nods her head in confirmation. That certainly explained why Kylo was so powerful with the Force, but yet, it didn't explain why he had decided to join the First Order and fight for them instead. And Han, he's Kylo's father? She nods her head slowly, and you can see something in her eyes that you don't like. Where is he? Is he okay? She stares at you for a long time without saying anything, and you can see the sadness in her eyes. You're about to apologize, but you sense something else emanating from her. Something else that you can sense through the Force. There's a sadness, yes, a sense of resignation, but there's something else there behind that. There's a fire and anger, not a pure burning rage like Kylo's, but an intense desire for justice brought upon by years and years of guilt. You shake quickly as if to dispel the thought from your mind. Sorry, a broom just fell over and freaked me out. No, you tell her, and for a moment she looks confused before she realizes that you must have gotten an impression of her thoughts through the Force. No, that's not possible, you insist. I don't know if I know Ben, but I know Kylo, and he would never hurt anyone that he cares about. You can feel your heart beating in your chest, your pulse pounding against your temple. No, it wasn't true. It couldn't be true. Kylo had saved Sadie, hadn't he? He hadn't even liked Sadie, hadn't even known her, and yet he had spared her life because of you. He did a good deed simply because you asked him to. There was good in him, at least then. There's no way he would kill his own father. Before or after I was there, you ask her, clearly aware of how much your voice is wavering as you speak. After. Her own voice is quiet, resigned. You try to decide if that's better or worse, but you can't really bring yourself to believe that he had done it at all. Yes, Kylo had never returned to visit you again, but surely that was just because he was busy or he was in danger, right? Had so much changed in him in just a few short years to make him into this cold-blooded killer? Or had he always been that way? Had his kindness towards you really just been an anomaly? Just a guise masking a much sinister, much darker persona? You may not have known his father, but you knew yours, and you knew that as much as you hated him sometimes, you would never have been able to bring yourself to kill him. Kylo had told you that he loved you, and he meant it then, hadn't he? But did that mean he loved you now? No, that wasn't the right question. It was a distraction from asking yourself the right question. The real question was, could you love him now? Could you love the man who killed his own father? The man who had done probably many other unspeakable things as well? Whatever Hux had told Sadie, that had happened prior to you being on board. What other things had he done? Were they all as unforgivable as this? Well, you had come here for answers, and you were finally getting them. There's no doubt about that. What you were going to do with the information you received was a whole different story. You couldn't hide behind vague generalizations anymore. You had to face the truth. You leaned forward in your chair. Did he really kill his father? Yes. And it wasn't an accident? No. You lean back in your chair and cross your arms over your chest as if to create an invisible barrier between you and the truth. Tell me everything.